typically when you walk into a store as a parent of a new player, the people in the store offer you a beginner stick or a starter stick, and it looks something like this. This one has some use, but it basically looks like this. And there's some significant setbacks about this stick. If you take a look at this stick, the design is fundamentally flawed. The linear nature of this design has some problems that we're going to get into. When you take a ball and put it into the stick, now, if many of you know, but not everyone may know, the rule. The rule for a girl stick is you can just barely see the top of the ball over the edge. So this is what's considered a sufficient pocket for the stick. Now, sufficient pocket is really kind of ironic because that's really no pocket at all. If you take a look at that, and when the ball sits in it, if you see sitting this way, it's already partially hanging out of the stick. So for a new player to try and use this, it's very difficult. And why? Because how tight this is, when she goes to catch the ball is going to come in, basically trampoline out of the stick. So she's going to have a difficult time catching it. And then once she catches it, the ball is basically jiggling around inside this head. It is not sitting comfortably in the pocket. So she's going to struggle to cradle. And then when she goes to throw, what's going to happen is when she goes to set and move her hands, the ball is going to come out of the stick, and the trajectory is going to be very high because the shooting strings, these two strings here, the top and the lower, don't serve any purpose based on the fact that there really is no pocket in the stick, as you can see by this line. So the throwing motion, as we teach, as it comes up, and it's going to throw very high, the result is she's going to be frustrated and she's going to overcompensate. So her throwing motion is then going to be more of every time she throws, a downward motion. So we teach proper form and technique in our academy for players, and we see all the time players overcompensating. And then we give them a properly tuned stick, and they end up throwing everything at the ground because they've overcompensated so significantly. So the takeaway with this is these are the most economical sticks you can buy, but the most important thing you want to understand is that this stick is not good value. You don't want to buy a stick like this. They really shouldn't make this stick. If you were to give this stick to an advanced high school player or a college player, she would have a very difficult time playing with this. This stick is for no one. So the answer is to spend a little bit more money and to get what's called an offset head. An offset head looks something like this. Let me show you the difference between the two. Starter stick, offset head. Okay, significant difference in geometry and design. So what's important is with this stick, it allows the ball to sit much more comfortably. Now this is a stick straight out of the store. It sits much more comfortably in the stick, and then once the pocket is broken in, which I'll show you in just a minute, it allows the player to play much more comfortably. Throw, catch, and cradle. So the bottom line is when you go to buy a stick, you do not want to buy a beginner stick, a starter stick. You want to spend a little bit more money and buy your daughter a stick that has an offset head. That's the first takeaway. The second thing I want to talk about today is how to break in a pocket. Because the other difficult thing about girls lacrosse is, unlike most sports in the world, where when you buy their racket or the stick or the glove, it's ready to play with. A girls lacrosse stick comes, as we not so affectionately known, as a tennis racket. It's strung very tight and not broken in. And oftentimes parents don't know how to do it because you see all these strings and all these things going on here and you don't know what to do with it. So she just pulls off the tags and she goes and tries to play with it. And oftentimes, struggles again. So this stick without a pocket will play better, but still similar to that stick, the starter stick. What we want is this stick to be properly broken in, so it would look like that. So we know the ball sits barely above the edge of the stick, and it would therefore sit in the pocket nicely. It would cradle comfortably, and it would allow the player to play, throw, catch, and cradle very well. So that's what we want to get to, and that's why we want the offset head. But in order to get there, we need to adjust that pocket. So that's what the next thing I want to talk to you guys about. If you take the new stick, if you take the new stick and you turn it around, there are a number of strings at the bottom. This is what's called the center channel of the tracker, and these are the leathers on either side. Sometimes these leathers are nylon in some of the sticks, but either way, they serve the same role. So what we want to do is we want to untie these, all four of these things, and basically loosen this up. Loosen the bottom up. We're going to create some slack. I'm going to pull the leathers out a little bit. And what I'm going to do is basically create room for the stick, for the ball. And it basically starts to loosen it up. And so you loosen those up, tighten it up on the bottom again, and so your rule of thumb is so that the ball, you can just see the top edge. I'm not going to go through the whole adjustment now, but you understand my point. And so that will allow the ball to sit comfortably in the pocket at the regulation height. The other very important point, besides pocket depth, are the shooting strings. Now I'm also going to change over to another stick that has darker colors so you'll understand it. But the shooting strings are the top string across and the U that's right here. More easily seen on this stick with the red and black. So this is our top string. This is the most important shooting string in the stick. And the reason being is this allows for downforce or whip when the players throw with the ball. If you look at, let me take this other stick back. If you take a look at the ball as it moves through, I'm not sure if you can see this well or not. The shooting strings basically in this stick don't affect, you can't see that they're even there because they don't affect the contour of the pocket. Okay? When you see a stick that's been broken in with properly adjusted shooting strings, as this one has, you see the pocket, and then you see the shooting strings actually cause the pocket to change. It doesn't go curved straight up, it actually cuts in because they're these have been tightened very tightly, and then will therefore come up and force the ball to go out and down. It will allow her to throw on a line drive and shoot on a nice hard shot or a bounce shot. So that's critical. So that's initially breaking it in. The other more important part, a very important part is with a girl stick is they require some maintenance and observation. Unlike the boy stick, once you break in a mesh pocket, it pretty much is set. A girl stick, because there's all these different strings going on in the stick, things loosen, things come untied, and the girls don't seem to pay much attention to it. We see this time and time again in our academy where players will come into a class and we will look at their form and they look fundamentally, look sound, look good, but the ball's not going where it should go. It's because her stick is out of tune. We'll often take a coach's stick, give it to the player and say, hey, try this. And all of a sudden she's magically hitting corners and throwing really accurately and playing very well. So all the girls need to know, whether you're a beginner or an advanced player, is that you need to pay attention to your stick. You need to keep an eye on it. The shooting strings, which, as I said, we like to pull this very tight and keep it tight. These strings, the knots come untied. The nylon stretches. If they're playing in some bad weather, some water, it may stretch. So there's lots of reasons why you need to maintain and tune your stick. If you don't, it affects the way you play. So basically, if you do that, it's going to improve your game. We see players all the time who are good players, who could be very good players, players who are struggling, who could be solid players, just because they're not playing with a suitable stick that's properly tuned. So the takeaways for today are, one, when you're buying a stick, make sure that you buy a stick with an offset head, as we've discussed. And then secondly, when you do get it, bring it home, make the proper adjustments along the bottom, and then your top shooting string, keep that very tight as possible. There's some other small adjustments that we could talk about later, but those are the fundamentals that are important that'll get her on her way. Thank you very much for listening and hope to see you on the field soon.